Hi everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And today's guest is Scott Stuewe. He's CEO and president of DirectTrust. Welcome, Scott.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're here at your conference talking interoperability. You've talked a lot about the directory and some improvements you made there, but what's your current approach to the direct directory?
Yeah, so today the 19 HISPs that participate in the DirectTrust directory basically contribute flat files, and those flat files are, contain all the information about their directory entries, and so they include the direct address themselves, but also demographics about the organization and the person. And so the challenge is that the flat files are they're aggregated frequently, like basically they're supposed to be every 72 hours that they're actually aggregated, and then we allow them to be downloaded anytime. So that's the basic model today, is aggregating flat files from 19 players, roughly 1 million addresses in the directory.
Wow. So what are some of the challenges, though, with this approach? I mean, obviously 3-day delay, that's partial, but I think there's got to be more like to the trust in it, or what other challenges do you see?
Well, first, to the 3-day delay actually can be a lot more, because there's actually, the HISP that contributes over here, and then there's the HISP that uses that information over here. So the aggregation process might actually be 6 days apart if everybody's actually doing it in 72 hours, and they don't. So, so that's one thing, is that yes, it gets a little stale. The biggest issue, though, we see with the directory as it comes from this notion that it's a flat file. And in a flat file, it's very difficult to represent hierarchy. So you've got hierarchy in healthcare is very complex. And for example, you've got organizations that have parent organizations and children organizations, like an IDN and their hospitals and their practices. And so that hierarchy is impossible to represent in this sort of of a hierarchy or in a flat file. And so the other problem is that general many-to-one problems, where I'd like to put, for example, more than one name for a health system. Like if I wanted to have the AKA for the health system and the name that's really on their charter, those two names there's no place for both of them. There's only one slot. So many-to-one relationships is not relational because it's flat.
And do you have a process for removing addresses? I mean, it feels like to me that would be a problem.
That is a problem. The process for removing varies by the way it's connected between the HISP and the EHR. So just kind of constructing really quickly in your mind the way this works, think 4 boxes, right? There's the one electronic system that is the EHR, the electronic health record system that contributes records to the HISP. And then on the other side, you get another HISP that does that for their clients. So there's these 4 boxes. And so in the middle is our circle, if you will, where all of this stuff gets aggregated. So the challenge is that each of the integrations between the HISP and the EHR are different. And so as a consequence, exactly how they get the direct addresses into their system, it varies. Some of them just absorb the whole thing in. And what happens is it gets into their EHR, and some of them are reasonably good at it. They can actually see that an address is no longer in the aggregated set, and they'll take it out.
Gotcha.
But a whole lot of them are not very good at it. And so, and that manifests in some obvious dissatisfaction with the way the directory works for people.
Sure. So what are you doing to really address some of these challenges?
Well, we spent a lot of time on it. First off, we started having an understanding that there were, first of all, lots of different directory activity going on in the marketplace. Lots of people trying to figure this problem out, because a multi-contributor directory is a special problem. So we actually went to a conference, or I went to one in 2019, that was actually put on by the ONC, and they invited everybody who cared about directories or knew anything about them. And it was a very good conversation. And really at that meeting, I realized that I really need to go back to my community and say, we really need to work on this, because this is this is something we really need to improve. And so then we kind of went into the era of trying to figure out how we could do that. And so what we settled on, after looking at some commercial opportunities and alternatives that we really couldn't afford, we thought, well, we needed a data governance process, and we probably needed a new architecture. So there's some of the problems we could solve with just data governance, but like, let's get the data all cleaned up. But
that's helpful.
That's a piece of it. But then you can't solve the problem of many-to-one, for example, if I'm going to still have a flat file. So I'm going to have to change my architecture somehow. So that median 19 also exposes to this idea of a FHIR-based directory that is a standard that is being developed for use for a national directory.
Okay. And
that's what we are. We're a national directory, so this seems like a good model for us to approach. And so that's kind of the plan we laid out. But that was that was in 20, and so we started this process really in 20 with just kind of trying to come to conceptual conclusions about how we're going to do it, and then what we needed to do to actually improve quality. What were the field edits we needed to do to make each of the individual fields more complete and more accurate?
Yeah, well, it makes sense to change to a different structure to be able to update it. I mean, the multi-problem. But I think what's interesting, as you said, was with a multi-stakeholder collaboration of a directory like this, you can't solve it all yourself. So what can members do to kind of support the improvement?
Yeah, and first off, I should say that we're in a development project at this point. So we're going to have a piece of development done. We started the project at the beginning of the year, and really at the very beginning of the year, we started the project, and it's almost 2/3 done now. Okay,
Right.
so there's a lot of the pieces are done. So we built this capability to do field validation, and we built a capability to do queries. So you can query the directory using FHIR now. So it's kind of a new capability. So for our members, what we want our members to do is to be aware that really by the end of the year, there's a new way that they could interact with the directory. They actually won't have to change. We're leaving the old model in place side by side with the new one, so that if they want to make a change, they can. And the reasons that they might make the changes are many, because there's a lot of new value in this new architecture. But they may choose to drag their feet. We hope that they participate in two ways. First, we want them to really go back to their clients, because we're going to give them reports that say, here's the problems in your directory, can you help us fix them? I mean, just identifying the problems obviously doesn't make them go away. So we're doing things like checking the validity of an NPI against NPES, the national.
Nice.
So we're actually looking at that external source of truth, or we're looking at Google Places to see, in fact, that this is a real honest-to-goodness location that they've provided. And so these kinds of things we're doing. So they'll get a lot of value out of that only if they actually use the reports we give them to do something with them, and they have to go back to their clients. So that's the first thing. We need them to help us with the improvement of the quality of the data. And the second thing is they need to get on their roadmap the work that will be required to make a change to this new paradigm. And the benefits of the new paradigm, particularly for update, are going to be immense, because we're going to have this opportunity to be tightly linked with a FHIR-based API, so that an EHR could potentially know exactly what's happening with the directory at any moment in time. They could check to see that a given directory is still in the directory, and if not, remove it, or however it is they want to manage it. Lots of really interesting possibilities around improving that latency problem and the quality problem of a direct address that's just hanging out in the EHR, and when actually it's the doctor is retired or deceased.
Yeah. So talk about that shift, right? So I guess, you described the batch file process,
Yes.
the 3-day process. This is now a shift to a FHIR updates where it's just one FHIR, one patient, or one doctor, or how does it work?
This will support both batch update by FHIR, as well as it will provide the ability to do one record at a time. And so people could choose how they want to integrate, but regardless, they wouldn't. What we do today is we drop the whole file every day. Okay, so if they wanted to update all of their records again, they could, but we wouldn't drop them ever. They would send us a record, and we would update the existing record. Usually, like the way our aggregation process works today, is we literally wipe the slate clean and make a new aggregation every night from the most recent contribution. And that has worked really well for us for 5-6 years. It's just, so the million addresses that are in the directory re-aggregate well, and it works well. It's actually an effective directory, except for the issues I brought.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was also interesting from that session, there's a field called purpose,
Yes.
which I think goes to your point of having multiple addresses for the same doctor or the same organization. And it's interesting that, in that discussion, the purpose field is already there. Talk about that and how someone could use that field today.
Well, so interestingly, this flat file is actually based on a standard, and one of the fields in that standard is this notion of, they call it service description. And so it was described as, the way the standard describes service description is that it's the intention for this particular endpoint or a direct address. And so it was ready-made for it, but nobody had ever populated it with anything. So it's just out there for our use. The other thing is about fields of this sort is that if you don't also figure out what the value set will be for that field, it doesn't help, right? Sure. So you have to say, okay, I'm going to make this set of codes, and here's what the meaning is for each of those codes. And so that is really the big piece we're doing now. Actually, we're in the process, and actually we'll be able to publish that value set this year. In fact, actually, we'll probably do it fairly soon, because at the conference, someone said, "Can I have it now?" I said, well, and my project manager stood up and said, "I don't see why not." And I thought, well, okay, I suppose that's true, because we are. It's a work in process. We'll probably add rows to it, but we're not going to change them, because they're. So I think it's going to be really important, because that also could give you some really interesting, capabilities.
Yeah, no, it made sense to me, because as I think about all the people I've talked to at the conference here, they're using it in such a wide variety of ways, whether it's EMS or whether it's, foster homes getting notifications, or whether it's providers and hospitals and long-term post-acute care and SNFs, and it's like they all have these different purposes. And is it for a referral, or is it an alert, or is it? And so it makes a lot of sense why you would do that.
Yeah, and I think that it also opens up some automation potentials. So, and the really exciting things we're thinking about are, could I, in the workflow for the user, I could actually provide the mechanism. They showed this actually in the demo, where you can actually get. You could do a query for all of the pediatricians in this zip code that support 360X, which is a special way of doing closed loop referrals. Okay. So I could do who can really do these newfangled closed loop referrals that a very small percentage of the market can do, and where are they, and show them to me on the map. So that they were able to demonstrate that. This is very, very interesting idea. But in addition to that, you could actually just plumb into your programming. For instance, in 360X, you can actually send referrals to multiple potential partners. And so 360X could literally, HISP could pull from the directory on an automated basis, create multiple messages and send them to multiple targets, and ask them all, hey, would you like this referral? And the first one to come back and say, I'll take it, would close the loop. Yeah. So it's like the opportunity to do that on a completely automated basis. Here's what's the problem. If people don't fill out their NPIs, that's not going to work very well. So that's another ask for our community is, please, we actually already have policy that says they're supposed to fill out a series of required fields. They're actually required if known, if appropriate. So if you're a doctor and you have an NPI, we need to have your NPI in the field. So I think if they help us with that, those automation opportunities are behind that.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thanks so much for sharing the insights and perspectives. You gave us some really interesting insights. I think we all thought with Direct is we need a directory. So it makes sense why it's so important to organizations. So thanks for sharing, and thanks everyone for watching. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Scott.
It was great being here. Thanks, John.